back on the rare, but not necessarily good.
Well, the way I look at it, I had a friend in Chicago back in the 60s who had a standard line, hemophiliacs are rare, but I would not pay to become one. And rarity, in the case of musical instruments, is not good in and of itself. If you're collecting coins and stamps, USA coins or stamps that are rare, that's good. And if you find a coin or a stamp that actually has a mint error on it, where they double stamped something or stamped something upside down, that's better yet. If you have a guitar that they screwed up, that's just a screw up. They installed the bridge upside down, this is not going to bring extra money. It would be rare, but it would be dumb and people wouldn't want that. Rare, in the case of musical instruments, usually indicates that for some reason or other, the public didn't buy them. Because if the public really wanted them, they wouldn't be so rare. These were commercially made instruments. Companies like Martin, Fender, Gibson, Epiphone, Guild, whatever, even little builders like D'Angelico and Stromberg didn't want to make one-of-a-kind pieces. They wanted to come up with a model that people would order in some quantity. You don't design the best you can to make one or two or even a limited edition of 10. You design the best you can and then hope people will order enough to keep you busy. And if something is extremely rare, it means that either it wasn't a very good design, so people looked at it and said, ew, and, or it didn't sound good and they didn't like it, or occasionally something would happen, like for example the case of the Lohr-signed F-5 Mandolin. It was not introduced till mid-22 when the mandolin orchestra boom had just died. They were trying to revive mandolin sales. They introduced the best mandolin ever known to man, except that the mandolin orchestra boom died at the end of 21. After that, you could just as well have the best boogie whip in the world after the automobile had been invented. It didn't matter how good it was, people just didn't want a mandolin. And they didn't want one for another 20 years. Not until Bill Monroe picked up an F-5 as a used instrument and started using it in bluegrass for a whole new sound, but not for the mandolin orchestra sound. But the original Lohr F-5s are exceedingly rare. They only made a couple hundred.
That's an example of good, but it was more a circumstance.
It was very, very, very good, but it was built at a time when people didn't want it. This is a 1923 F-5 Gibson mandolin signed by Lloyd Lohr.
Those are the ones you were talking about earlier.
And this is, as mandolins go, the Holy Grail. It's a 1923, the ultimate year. This is the prettiest back I've ever seen on one. It's in great condition.
How much would this mandolin sell for?
It's $205,000. It's a marvelous example.
See, one of the reasons I stopped playing the mandolin is even a decent one costs so much money.
Well, actually, there's pretty darn good mandolins that we can sell you for a couple $1,000s. You'd be surprised. Very good mandolins. Or you could look at the Flying V and the Explorer Gibsons that were introduced in '58. They were good, but they were introduced at a time when they were considered so avant-garde that people just didn't want them. They wouldn't be seen with one of those things. They were too goofy looking. It took another 10 years before people appreciated that this was something that might be good. So they were built either, in the case of the F-5, too late for the boom that they had been aiming it for, and too early for the new boom of bluegrass, or in the case of the Flying V and the Explorer, they were built too early and there was a demand later. Some people would say, well, the F-5 was built too early, but the fact is I say it was built too late because there had been a big mandolin boom from turn of the century on up to 1921, and that's what they were aiming it for. With the Flying V and the Explorer, they were aiming it for a market that just wasn't ready yet, but it sure is now, and it was starting about 10 years after that
Those are
model was
sought
introduced.
after now.
Well, they're very highly
prized.
sought after now. But I still remember when I started playing guitar in '63 and '64, there was one sitting new in a music store in Chicago. It was unsold. I could have bought it for $247.50. That was the retail list price. I didn't want it, neither did anybody else. It sat there for years. It was just considered too goofy. But now that's highly sought after. But there's plenty of models that are rare, that are just not particularly good, especially in the 1970s and early 80s. Gibson came out with lots of limited run things, trying them out, and most of them were goofy and didn't stick. And it was in the period when Norlin owned Gibson. The quality wasn't all that good. In order to be a great collector's item, it not only has to be something that's different from what is available readily new, it should be good. If it's not good, it's ultimately, in this market, not going to bring big